This it up.
Hello and welcome to the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs virtual public consultation for the Summary Amendment Bill 2022, also known as the Fireworks Bill. I am Nasser Mohammed, your moderator for today's program. I am joined by an esteemed panel today, and I would start with the introduction of Senator the Honorable Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, Minister in the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, and of the Law Reform Commission, Mr. Jared Jagrup, Mr. Samraj Haripal SC, and Ms. Chantel Lachman Singh. I'd like to also welcome key stakeholders and the viewing public on various social media platforms. Today's agenda is very straightforward, informative, and interactive. For the viewing public on social media, you are kindly asked to send your comments and queries in the comment section, and we will accommodate as much concerns as time permits. To start things off today, we would now shift to a presentation on the proposed bill.
As we approach our 60th anniversary celebrations, prepared to celebrate and to embrace safe practices, it is appropriate to conduct this town hall consultation on the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2022, otherwise known as the Fireworks Bill. A warm welcome to all, and I thank you for joining in today's public consultation. Over the years, there have been calls and concerns by members of the public regarding the use of fireworks. The Law Reform Commission developed a policy paper to review the current law on fireworks and draft legislation. I am pleased to be joined today by the legal officers from the Commission who have also worked with my team from the Criminal Justice Unit of the Attorney General's Office. Let me begin with some background on the work that has been done so far on the issue of fireworks use in Trinidad and Tobago. First, in 2017, the Parliament conducted a Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration on an inquiry into the adverse health effects of fireworks. Several stakeholders participated and expressed views on the matter. In 2020, the Environmental Management Authority, or the EMA, conducted a public survey on the use and impact of fireworks in Trinidad and Tobago, and in 2021, published a position paper on the management of fireworks in Trinidad and Tobago. This previous work and recommendations emanating from it were taken into account by the Law Reform Commission in preparing the policy and draft law. It is appropriate that I express my sincere gratitude to the Law Reform Commission and their diligent and excellent work on this matter. I would also like to acknowledge the critical contributions and recommendations of the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament and the Environmental Management Authority and all persons who participated and gave their valued feedback. Some of the findings of the work conducted were: the JSC report illustrated the adverse effects of firework on people's health, particularly the elderly, on the environment, and on our animals. From 2013 to 2017, there were 25 fireworks-related injuries in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2017, a total of 7 cases involved children ages 12 and under. In these cases, persons suffered serious injuries with burns to their eyes, skin, hands, hearing loss, and even, tragically, amputations. The survey conducted by the EMA identified the major types of pets affected by fireworks. 60% of affected pets were dogs, 17 were cats. The observed effects on pets included loss of life, erratic behavior, trauma, seizure, distress, and self-destruction. The AMA also noted the effects of fireworks on respondents, including persons in their households, with an overwhelming 79% of persons indicating they were adversely affected. 21% of these were elderly persons and 10% were infants. Persons experienced anxiety, sleep deprivation, temporary or partial hearing loss, hypertension, panic attacks, and worsening of prior health conditions. These statistics, coupled with the public's discontent with the current law, prompted the Commission to develop its policy paper and to draft the fireworks bill. In December 2021, the bill was presented to the Cabinet. Cabinet recommended further consultation with you, the public, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. My office circulated the draft bill for public feedback in January 2022 by widespread social media consultation with the general public, as well as by written requests for feedback from key stakeholders. During that period, AGLA received a total of 262 responses from the public. Written submissions were also received from key stakeholders, including several government ministries, animal welfare organizations, law enforcement bodies, regional corporations, businesses, state entities, and NGOs. My appreciation is extended to you, stakeholders and members of the public, for your valuable and comprehensive feedback on the circulated draft. Thank you for your patience and giving the Office of the Attorney General time to assimilate your submissions and make the necessary arrangements to hold this consultation. I propose to present a brief overview of the fireworks bill. In formulating the bill, the Commission also reviewed fireworks regulation in several jurisdictions, and two main approaches were identified. The first involves the imposition of strict prohibitions against the import, sale, and use of fireworks. This approach would essentially put an end to the industry, causing suppliers to suffer significant loss, render those in the industry unemployed, and citizens will no longer be able to purchase and use fireworks for their private entertainment. The second approach aims to balance the safety and entertainment values by regulating the industry through a system of authorizations and classifications. The bill is drafted on this approach because the provision of the Explosive Act currently reflects a similar approach. And secondly, closing the industry presents the risk of encouraging and promoting the illegal smuggling of fireworks, where the quality and safety of the fireworks entering the country will not be subjected to testing, which consequently may create a greater risk to national security and public safety. The bill contains 5 clauses and requires a simple majority vote. The purpose of this bill is to regulate the use of fireworks by way of a permit system and to make breaches of the law a ticketed offense. The bill proposes generally that once you intend to use fireworks, barring certain exceptions, you must apply to the Commissioner of Police for a fireworks permit. You must be 18 years or older to obtain this permit. The permit will specify the type and amount, the date, location, and time during which the fireworks may be discharged. You must notify certain entities of your intention to discharge fireworks, and this must be done at least 14 days prior to discharge. This is essential as it allows for reasonable arrangements to be made for the safety and protection of persons, animals, and property. I mentioned that under the bill, there are certain exceptions to obtaining a firework permit. Persons will be allowed to discharge fireworks without a permit on a public holiday. between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. and on New Year's Eve between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. the next morning. This allows us to celebrate our varied cultures and festivities with reasonable time limits. The bill also contains restrictions on the use of fireworks. So, for example, a person is prohibited from discharging fireworks in a manner that might create danger or constitute a nuisance to any person or property. You cannot discharge in, on, or onto any house, vehicle, or street. This is geared towards minimizing the risk of injury and damage to persons, animals, and property. The bill also provides for parameters for the discharge of fireworks. It prohibits discharge within a half-mile radius of a zoo, a hospital, a home for the elderly, forest reserve, national parks, or a farm where animals are reared. This is to safeguard vulnerable persons and animals from the adverse effects of fireworks. Where an offence is committed under the bill, the penalty takes the form of a fixed penalty notice, which would require the person to pay the fixed penalty within the time specified under the notice, with the right to appeal. This ensures that the court system is not overburdened with such matters. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will be responsible for the enforcement and prosecution of the proposed law. However, to this end, the support of the public, the support of you, Trinidad and Tobago, is crucial. If you observe a breach of the law, you should not only promptly report the matter to the police, but also endeavor to obtain proof of the offense in real time through a video, photographs where possible, even through the use of your cell phone. As we all know, the use of fireworks can dissipate as quickly as the wind, and therefore this will assist the TTPS in securing sufficient evidence to proffer charges against alleged perpetrators of the law. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, overall, the Fireworks Bill seeks to strike a balance between the responsible use of fireworks and the peaceful enjoyment of property, public safety, and the interests of the fireworks industry. This bill has considered the interests of all relevant stakeholders. No one approach can please everyone's personal interests. We are here today to ventilate the issues and arrive at a consensus on the legislation in order to move this matter forward of fireworks. Personal health, personal security, and a healthy environment should be given priority in the responsible use. I therefore welcome your views and look forward to your valued contribution. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Before today's consultation, as you indicated, stakeholders were contacted by the AGLA to supply concerns and views on the bill, and we have a list of them, so I want to kick off the Q&A session with you, Minister.
Okay.
So, Minister, why the issue of fireworks is so important right now?
Well, Naz, if you could permit me, before I jump
Sure.
into answering your question, I just want to personally, on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, thank the viewing and listening public for joining in on this, our national consultation on the fireworks bill. I do apologize in advance if the members of the listening public, viewing public may hear noise in the background. I mean, true to form is the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago. Right outside our walls, I understand the protest is taking place, but in government, we must continue the country's business, and therefore we will continue with our consultation on the fireworks bill. Again, Naz, if you permit me some time, I just want to acknowledge and publicly thank the dedicated, diligent, and hard-working officers of the Law Reform Commission. I must recognize Jared, Senior Counsel Harry Paul, Chantal, for their contribution to this bill. And I'm doing that, Naz, particularly because I'm of the view, and I've heard colleagues, especially the previous Attorney General used this as well. We as politicians, we're in a revolving door. We're here today, we're gone tomorrow. But these are the officers that we must recognize. These are the public servants who really move the ministry and the lawmaking process. And I would fail if I don't use this opportunity to publicly recognize their hard work and dedication to this bill and all of the legislation coming out of our office. So that being said, and I thank you for the opportunity to do that, if I may refer myself now to the question, revert to the question that was asked. I mean, the reality is we're entering into what I personally call fireworks season. We have the 60th anniversary independence coming up, in which we know fireworks is a very big part of that celebration. The country as a whole, we are coming out of COVID. Well, of course, the regulations has been relaxed. And we know once Diwali approaches, once Christmas approaches, people are going to meet in numbers, and fireworks, a part of our culture is that fireworks is a part of that celebration. So recognizing all of this and understanding, at least based on the consultation that was done and what we know, what is common knowledge, understanding the harm of fireworks and the destruction fireworks, the unregulated use of fireworks has resulted in this country, the loss of limbs, not life yet, thank God, the loss of private property, loss of animal life, which is critical. I have a little husky, so I totally understand where pet lovers come from when we speak about the impact of it on animals. Recognizing this harmness, we would have believed it's critical at this point for us to address this particular bill.
Thank you so much, Minister. Again, we have questions coming in on our Facebook comment section. We ask everyone to not inbox us, but comment on the question so we can feed the panel your questions today. We just got our first question via our inbox. It's about regulated use.
Right.
Minister, you spoke about the law reform approach for balancing different interests, right? So this question came in from Suzanne, and she wanted to know, what does regulated use of fireworks mean?
Well, to put it very simply, because we have to understand it's not just legal minds who are logged in or locked in this afternoon. You know, regulation, I mean, if we look at a simple dictionary meaning, when we speak about regulating, we are talking about controlling, managing. If we apply that concept now to the fireworks industry that we are seeking to regulate, that is how this bill attempts to regulate and manage the use, which we refer in the bill as the discharge of fireworks. There are particular clauses and provisions in the bill, for example, that speaks to the time, the date, the locality, the place in which fireworks can be used. That is a mechanism in regulating. It's now persons who would want to use fireworks outside of public holidays, outside of New Year's Eve, would have to apply for a permit. That is an aspect of regulation. And what is also critical, because at least in doing my homework in preparation for this, I know a lot of stakeholders were particularly concerned about the use of fireworks not users of fireworks, not requiring a permit on public holidays and on New Year's Eve. There's, believe it or not, even within the parameters of the bill, there are clauses and safeguards which even regulates the use of fireworks on those days. Because of course, those provisions in the bill and clauses in the bill speaks to the time in which fireworks can be used. I believe on the public holidays it's from 8 to 9, so you have 1 hour. On New Year's Day, for example, it's from 12 midnight to 1 o'clock the following day. So all of this in totality, Naz, in essence, is what we speak of regulating the use, and which we refer to as the discharge of fireworks.
So Suzanne sent a follow-up question. She said her 50th birthday is coming up if she will not be able to send up fireworks.
Well, once the bill is until the bill is passed, because in preparation for this, my team and I, we were actually joking about this, we were actually joking about that. But you know, the reality is that this is not law as yet, and of course it's business as usual, unfortunately, as it relates to the purchase and use of fireworks, hoping and we are still, as government, we trust our citizens are responsible, and we know even in the absence of law and regulation, persons have to take personal responsibility in the use. So Suzanne, until the law is passed, you can go ahead and purchase, but we are depending on you as a responsible citizen to, of course, use it within your discretion, understanding the safety of others.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned permits, so I just want to put forward a question to Senior here.
Right.
You know, because when you talk about permits and all these other things, is that what does having this permit mean for the use of it?
Well, as the thing is, the law now is seeking to regulate the persons who would want to use fireworks, which, as we say, is discharge fireworks.
Right.
And because at the moment it's so unregulated, the proposal is from the Commission to set up a system of persons having to apply for a permit. Having get the permit, then they would have a lawful right, or be rightful in law, to buy and use fireworks. So at the moment, the Commission's proposal was that the persons seeking to get a permit should apply to the Commissioner of Police. Of course, we are aware that in the first rounds of consultation, there was proposals to reconsider that position, whether or not it would be really practical to apply directly to the Commissioner of Police. And perhaps consideration should be given to have the application be made to the senior superintendent of the districts, which we are much closer to the persons seeking to have that permit be granted in a timely fashion.
Right.
Of course, at the end of the day, the government of Trinidad and Tobago would have to take into account that proposal and consult with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as to whether or not, from a practical and efficient point of view, that would be the way it would finally be introduced into law.
Right. So, I mean, practical, efficient, and administrative too, right?
Yes.
Speaking of administrative, so if I am to come out off of the street to apply for a permit, is there a cost attached, and how much in advance should I apply for a permit?
At the moment, the Commission, having examined the models where permits are used worldwide, in a number of jurisdictions, it is the standard system of governing the use of fireworks that permits are used. Persons are required to pay a fee, an application fee. At this stage, we have not yet settled what would be that exact fee. It's under consideration. And at the current position, only in relation to use of a permit in a town in Trinidad and Tobago under the Summary Courts Act, you can have an application within 48 hours, 2 days, correct? Right, of the application. However, for this piece of reform, the Commission is taking into account one of the proposals that came from the first rounds of the consultation, and that was that some consideration should be given to perhaps up to a month because of the follow-up requirements that the minister initially mentioned about notification to entities and how you use it and where you purchase and how and those sort of things. So therefore, we are looking at the idea that the application should be made to perhaps the commissioner or the senior superintendent of the area, and that the application be made minimum at least a month before the granting of it.
Right. So again, as you say minimum, it hooks into a question from Akil. Akil is asking if there should be a restriction on the amount of fireworks that one individual can purchase.
I will take that one. I think that is a very valid consideration, because if you want to look into the total regulation of fireworks, I mean, as one way, if you in relation to the regular average household customer, you wouldn't want somebody having 100 pounds of fireworks in their homes. So the Commission has looked at the entire supply chain of fireworks, and we did consider what ways we could implement, what new provisions we could put forward to regulate the supply. Now, this bill deals with the use of fireworks, which captures the short-term objectives of the Commission's recommendations. And that consideration, the limit and the amount of fireworks a consumer could purchase, would be further examined in the later work of the Commission.
But I'm sure, Minister, perhaps in the legislative agenda of the government, perhaps later on, further amendments will come to deal with the issue of supply,
Correct.
purchase and supply. At this moment,
And
as
that-
Jared indicated, the bill is focusing on use.
Use.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right. So, I mean, provided guidelines in the bill, for use, etc. But we also have guidelines for penalties as well, right? So, what are the penalties for using fireworks illegally?
Well, I'll take that question. I know that's quite a sticking point for a lot of
Yes,
people and
yes.
a big concern. We've decided, based on the information we've gotten, that perhaps the easiest way forward would have been to implement something called a fixed penalty notice. That really is a ticketed offense.
Is it like a traffic management system, like how?
Yes, it's
Correct.
like a traffic
It's
ticket.
Correct.
almost like
Okay.
exactly like
Yeah.
a traffic ticket.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically, it says it provides the same information: what the offense is, where it would have been committed, the time, the particulars. It would indicate where you would have to go pay the ticket, normally to a court, and the amount that you will have to pay. Built into that system as well, there's also an appeals process whereby if you feel aggrieved that you are unfairly ticketed, of course you have the right to appeal, and it will go through the courts as per any normal appeal process.
Will there be demerit points as a citizen?
Well, we'll take that into consideration going forward.
And the process for paying the tickets?
It's the same for
A
all
traffic.
fixed penalty notices, that you go to the court that is designated and you pay your fee, and that's it.
All right. Minister, we have a question here from Aaron. Right, so Aaron actually links exactly what I was going to ask you next. An issue happened in January of this year in the form of sky lanterns.
Yeah.
What is the government's position on sky lanterns
Well,
and its use?
I'll start with my personal opinion. I mean, it's for me personally, it's one of the prettiest form of fireworks.
Yes.
But it is. But let's be serious about this one. That's a very, very important question asked by Aaron. We are all aware, because honestly, after that event that Aaron is speaking about in January 2022, I believe it was in Quarry Street, Port of Spain, and we saw the devastating and the devastation, that mishap resulted in. We saw the loss of property.
Yeah.
We saw that lives were destroyed. We saw cars were gutted. An entire community brought into mourning. I recall even the MP for the area being very public about how devastated he was by the harm that was brought into his constituents as a result of this lantern. And, I also recalled, and you all could correct me, but I recall during our public consultation, some of the infant stakeholder comments, TNTech also made mention
Yes, they did.
to the devastation that these beautiful as it may be lanterns often results in the destruction of their lines, which of course carries a cost to repair. So considering that, you remember, as government, as policymakers, as lawmakers, we have to balance the use. We have to always take into consideration paramount is the protection of the community, and the community is our people. And as beautiful and as nice as lanterns may be, certainly it is something that it is before us for consideration. Of course, the decision would either be whether we are regulating the use of the lanterns or whether we are outrightly banning it. But of course, that NAS is the reason why we are here before the public with this bill. That's why we are here asking and soliciting the views of the public so that it will guide us as the policymakers, the legislators, in determining what position we will adopt.
All right, thank you, Minister. We have Ria Khan from Facebook. Under the section 101, why is there no public notice provision? The section allows for notification to various state bodies such as Fire Service and EMA. However, there must be public notice to allow citizens to take precautionary measures, especially for their pets and objects, if necessary. I guess objects would be homes, etc. So, Mr. Harry Paul?
At the moment, when the Commission looked at the issue of the very minuscule aspect of the reform, which is the use of the fireworks, we had focused on the actual purchase and discharge, so that in that process, as the Minister indicated, there's a licensing system, there would be a fee. As my colleague here indicated, if you breach the law, there'll be penalties. But within it, I think the minister indicated that in her presentation, you have to notify certain entities in the area before you discharge, and I think there's a 14-day period.
Yeah.
We have not taken into account directly a notification by the user to any person else outside of that small category of named person groups, entities, EMA, fire service, etc. Maybe interesting proposal from our Facebook fan, whether that is something we'd want to consider, but we have to bear in mind the practical effect
Correct.
of implementing such a notice,
Correct.
because we will be imposing on a member of the public who have purchased firework an extra duty
Right.
to notify how far from where they live, are we notifying, when, and how. It sounds ideal, but in reality, is it something that the law would want to impose on firework users? That's something we have to seriously think about.
Correct.
It's a good point, but it will need some serious consideration.
All right. We have Carla. So Carla wants to know, this is from our Facebook again, Carla wants to know the type of feedback that we would have gotten when we asked for stakeholder feedback, etc. So, Minister.
As I recall, in our first stages of consultation, I believe it was over approximately 300, 300 not persons, but submissions we would have received. And of course, there are categories. If we break up that 300 submissions that we received, Naz, we are looking at submissions from the public, we are looking at submissions from NGOs, from state entities, and I think, I mean, at least it's a good place to start, and hence we are here again soliciting the views of the public. And you know, I, as the legislator, of course, I've had a 2-year stint in Parliament thus far, and often I know that is a cry, whether it's from the opposition or whether from the independents, asking what kind of public consultation has been, and it's a legitimate question to ask. And that is why I'm very pleased, at least before this bill even hits the Parliament, we can put into the public domain that to date we have had almost 300 submissions, which the law revision, of course, would have begun the process of researching, or of course reviewing, should be the word I should use, reviewing these submissions and determining, of course, the parts of what we will adopt and probably adjust our legislation as we go along. And then we are also hoping that coming out of today, and based on comments that are made, for example, what Ria would have spoken about and Senior would have properly and well, you know, very most competently dealt with previously, these kind of commentaries, what of course would drive us to go back to the drawing board and then of course review the legislation, review the policy with a view of taking into consideration the views that are solicited from this consultation.
So would there be almost like a communications plan to keep the public abreast as to the progress that's being made?
Of course. I mean, that is a part of responsible governance. And you know, Naz, this is not me being a politician, but I have seen, I mean, the 2 years that I've been here, I've had the benefit of also practicing in this ministry with the previous Attorney General. And that was something that I was always pleased about. You know, the previous Attorney General, the role he played in, of course, advocating and ensuring that communication was at all times out there on the legislation. Our new Attorney General has adopted that similar approach. And of course, me serving as the minister in the ministry, I'm so blessed to even have the opportunity to also be a part of the process, because it's our responsibility as legislators, as governments, to keep our population abreast as to what is going on. And so to answer your question, certainly the communication will be forthcoming as we continue this dialogue and this conversation on the fireworks bill.
And we want to
Well, Naz,
oh, yeah,
perhaps
sorry.
on my regard to the minister's point, we have to bear in mind that the lawmaking process consultation at this stage within the ministry is just one part of that process.
Correct.
The minister will take the matter to cabinet. At a post-conference, it could become public again. So persons be aware as to each stage as how the bill is going
Correct.
forward. And finally, we have a very vibrant parliament. Bills are laid in parliament and they go online. And you find that persons can comment. Of course, bear in mind also that members of the public could approach their MPs to bring forward a point that may be put forward in a parliamentary debate on the bill. So the whole process, even at this stage until it finally becomes law, still allows members of the public, directly and indirectly, to have a say in the process.
Right.
Excellent.
I mean, you mentioned the drafting process and going to Parliament. Can you tell me the next steps for this bill?
Well, subject to the minister, perhaps I would
Of course.
allow the minister to take the
No,
question.
well, the next step, Naz, of course, realistically, is that we will have to return to the drawing board, and because that's the purpose of the consultation. And upon returning to the drawing board, will be really to look at all of the stakeholder comments, and then, of course, the Law Reform Commission would it is only it will be necessary that the Law Reform Commission would also require time to consider, to research the comments and suggestions that would have and of course that would be solicited from this consultation. And once we return to that drawing board and we are comfortable that there is something that we can be proud of, and we have certainly taken into consideration the views of our citizens, then, as Senior would have alluded to, it would return to the cabinet. And once we have, of course, that blessings upon that particular policy position, that bill, then of course we know the regular process thereafter. We're looking at it going to the parliament and debates and all of that good stuff.
Gotcha.
And just add, if you would mind, Naz, because of the nature of the bill, one of the things we're also making provision is for regulations.
Correct. Correct.
If you look at the bill, you don't see an application for a permit at this stage. So that once the bill is passed, as the minister indicated, there's a proclamation clause that will hold its implementation. During that period, the ministry, in consultation with TTPS, National Security, the other line ministries,
Correct.
we will settle a number of regulatory matters like application fee, the application, perhaps if the application will be going to the commissioner directly or the senior superintendent, as we had alluded to earlier. And a number of other administrative matters will be settled for the regulations to come, and then together with the regs and the bill will proclaim, and then it will go into force.
All right, so we have a message from Sasha. So she wants to know what in the bill is being provided for the protection of persons, vulnerable persons, the elderly, the sick, and animals.
I'll take it. I would just want to start off by saying that consideration of the vulnerable persons and animals, these were really cornerstones in our consideration of what would be necessary in this piece of legislation. And as a result of that, we put in several things. For instance, the use on specified days and for specified periods of time. So public holidays, you have a certain time frame within which to use fireworks. And also the introduction of the permit system, whereby if you do want to use fireworks, you have to go through the process of applying and getting approval to do so. Now, just to add to that permit process, it's not just an application that you can just go in and get done immediately. There is verification that has to be done by the Commissioner of Police, possibly site visits to where you plan to discharge your fireworks. So it's meant to be a more thorough process than what currently stands. Also, as Mr. Our seniors just alluded to, the regulations will also be forthcoming, and that will stipulate even further stricter guidelines that must be considered and followed in granting of permits.
Right, so we have Kimberly Howard.
Naz, before you go, may I could add to my colleague, one other point is important, and that we have to pay attention. The Commission, based on an examination, I think of one of the Australian models, is that discharge of fireworks in protecting our vulnerable citizens, there's a zone limit to certain places, hospitals, zoos,
And we have done that in this.
elderly people,
Yeah.
care homes and stuff. That's a critical aspect because the limitation, the time, the spacing is quite contentious. How should we determine what is a safe zone? Half a mile, 2 miles?
Yeah.
So it would be nice to hear the views of the public in general on this matter.
Yeah.
What do they think the law should say? as a proposal for
Yes,
the
there's no
commission
formula,
and for the,
really.
for the government
There's
to then
no
finally
formula.
decide.
Well, you just hit on Kimberly Hawaii's question that she asked, can we please go over the distance for the zoos and the hospitals? She believed it was half a mile.
Yes,
Yeah, it's proposed to be half a mile.
proposed to be half a
Proposed.
mile.
Right.
Yeah.
Proposed.
Well,
Right.
it will be interesting, Naz, just to follow through that question. What sort of other views that people have, or
Correct.
the members of the public have?
Correct.
At the end of the day, law is a tool of social engineering. It reflects what the society wants.
Correct.
And the government is seeking to bring a piece of legislation. If there's anything, maybe next to marijuana, fireworks is a hot issue.
Yeah.
Especially at the minister say, this is fireworks season.
Well, Adam is just saying here now if there should be designated fireworks areas
Yes.
for national celebrations.
What do you say?
I mean, that is a good consideration. The issue with that is, and we did consider it, in fact, it was a common suggestion among the stakeholders in the first round of consultations. We would explore that option further, but we will have to consider who will organize and designate such places, who will bear
Correct.
responsibility for
Correct.
any
Liability.
for
Liability is good.
damage to property, injuries to persons.
Once you have a
So,
designated.
so that is a consideration, and
Yeah.
we will explore it further in the future.
So, use of fireworks, regulating the use of fireworks.
Yeah.
How can law enforcement effectively enforce this law, this proposed law?
Naz, I'll answer that question. Initially, when the commission examined this area of the law, the then Attorney General had raised a serious concern about law enforcement.
Yeah.
He had felt that because this issue is such a live issue to us, we should, as law reformers, come up with a model that will work, that is practical, that is efficient, that will not contribute to the continued delay within the judicial system. And in fact, I be honest with you, I think, Jared, it was the very AG who proposed that we modify the draft bill, which Chantel has been the drafter, and she had initially created summary offences.
Right.
And the then AG asked that we reconsider that and create fixed penalty offences similar to the traffic
Yeah.
system. Of course, we already have a very workable system for the ticketing
Fixed
system.
penalty, correct.
So therefore, in law enforcement here now, it will become easier. Once an officer has a reasonable grounds to believe that an offense has been committed, he can issue a ticket. A ticket then will set out a time frame for you to pay a fixed amount. So it's a shorter period for a matter to be completed. And finally, what is important is that the officer doesn't have to go get a sample of this fireworks to carry it somewhere to be tested and all that sort of thing.
Correct.
That
Verify
is
evidence, yeah.
the ancillary investigative stages that is so normal to serious offenses wouldn't apply. So we will have hopefully we'll have a more efficient, faster system whereby those who breach the law in relation to the use of fireworks and fireworks, they would be dealt with in an expeditious manner through the fixed penalty notice system.
Right.
And just to add, I remember Chantal, when she would have addressed penalties, she did, and this is something I just want to reiterate. Remember, notwithstanding it being by a ticketed offense, we have the appeal provision. So we have ensured that there's due process in the thing, right? So for persons who wish to challenge the tickets, that due process and that appeal process is still very
Indeed.
much available to someone.
So all sides could be heard.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
What is the rationale for not requiring permits on days the general public is most adversely affected by fireworks?
Well, this was an issue that we really went back and forth, especially with Jared and I discussing at the policy stage and in the beginning of the drafting stage as well. And we looked at several jurisdictions, and when you look at the different jurisdictions and how they choose to deal with it, you can see that there's a clear attempt to balance competing interests.
Correct.
You want to balance people
Use.
being able to use it versus people who are against it versus
Correct.
people who are have a business out of selling it. So
Correct.
you have to take all parties into consideration. So we thought it would be a good proposal, which is what it is now, a proposal to have public holidays on December 31st to be the days where you are exempted from having to apply and get a permit in order to use fireworks. And we've implemented certain timeframes within which you can
very
use
important.
it.
The
Yes,
time
certain
frame.
time frames. So you have a day and you have a time within which you can use it
Correct.
without a permit. So it still allows you to use fireworks, and hopefully this will encourage people to have that cultural shift that we're trying to achieve in using fireworks more, respectfully.
Correct.
And you not abuse it, misuse it, not make other people uncomfortable or, bothered by it. Everybody knows what the times are. Everybody knows what the dates are.
Correct.
Another thing is that when thinking about whether or not we should allow for permits on public holidays, we realize that on a practical level, a lot of people use fireworks during, especially December 31st.
Correct.
It would lead to possibly a floodgates of applications
In the
at the
police.
Commissioner of Police.
Correct.
So realistically, how many
we
applications?
would flood the commissioner's
We would
office.
flood the
Nobody will get a
Commissioner's
permit.
office. And realistically,
everybody
how many
Correct.
applications would he be able to,
Correct.
consider, especially in light of the issues and the details that he has to consider before
Yes.
granting a permit?
It won't-
How many permits would he realistically be able to grant? And
Practically, it won't work.
practically it wouldn't work. It would be a totally futile process. So, those are just some of the things that we considered, and we thought it's best to propose at least a regulated use at a regulated time, and let's see how that fits into the system that we have now, into our culture that we have
And
now.
understand, even on those days, remember, you can still be liable for a breach.
Yes.
Because if we are, even though, and that is without a permit. So you don't have a permit, yes. You did not require a permit, yes. But you discharge fireworks outside at 9 p.m. You have committed an offense, all right? You have gone beyond the
Fixed time.
Specified
correct,
times,
the fixed times. You have committed an offense. And that's why I would have started. I believe in one of my early submissions, I would have indicated that, there are still safeguards. So as Chantal would have spoken to, we are balancing the thing, but at the same time, there are still safeguards where a person, if they do not comply with those regulated hours, you would have committed an offense and be liable.
So we have Kern wants to know, I hire a decorator for my kids' birthday parties. Can there be an accredited company or companies that you can hire to discharge fireworks for your events? Or should there be accredited companies?
Well, not in this bill. If you think about it, we are looking at discharge.
Yes.
Yes.
This is a suggestion to put
Well-
into.
Well, I will take that now. The best practice would be to hire a professional fireworks operator. If in that setting and he wants a professional display, it would seem that would be the better option. I mean, I know there are local firework operators, but our laws, through the examination of the whole system, our laws don't require like certification, or it doesn't have anything in there to say this is what a firework operator. These are the requirements to being a professional fireworks operator or pyro technician.
Right.
But I would say that is something that we could look at in the future as well, because there are examples of codes for these professional operators and standards for them to follow. To practice safety, for example, that is the key. With fireworks, safety is the key. So I would say yes, if you could, it is advisable. You don't go and try buying professional fireworks and letting them off in your backyard. It is a good consideration. Whether or not the law should require persons to do that is another issue. To say that, okay, you want to have a fireworks display, you have to
Correct.
to hire a professional.
And then he spoke about an accredited, so
Yeah.
that is a different discussion.
Yes.
So accreditation is a whole different
Well, my
issue.
follow-up
Correct.
question to you, Jared, is that just like this suggestion and all these other things, I mean, what is the proposed changes? What are the proposed changes to the draft summary and consideration for recommendations so far and moving forward?
Well, let me just say thank you to the stakeholders who took the time to submit their comments on the draft bill. I mean, they had some very valuable points, and based on that feedback, the Commission is considering making some changes to the draft. I could give you some examples. One would be the same distance as highlighted by Mr. Harry Paul, that distance, the half-mile distance in Section 101C, that is not set in stone. We had suggestions from TNTech and even the EMA, which, would cause us to go back and rethink the whole, what is reasonable, what is a reasonable distance, what is a safe distance. Another suggestion was for persons who are found to have committed the offense, have been ticketed more than 2 times, in a period of the time.
An implied demerit system.
Implied demerit system.
If we could probably consider including a provision to blacklist such persons for receiving permits for a certain period, maybe for 2 years, 3 years, 1 year. Another one would be inserting in that list of places where fireworks should be restricted, the same section 101C, places such as police stations and petrol stations.
Yeah.
And even critical infrastructure, power stations, substations. So we are considering several changes, and based on the feedback from
Now, as if I may have to add to Jared's point, the proposals coming out from this first and second consultation, of course, the Commission would consider it and come up with its own policy consideration. But perhaps to the members of the public, they should be aware at the end of the day, it would be left up to our Honourable Minister and the Minister, DG, because at the end of the day, it is the Attorney General that will finalize the policy from the Ministry that will then form the basis of the finalization of the bill, and then it will go forward to Cabinet. So just to close off that whole issue on policy formulation coming out of the consultation.
I mean, when he spoke about accredited bodies and all these other things, there was another matter submitted about EMA. EMA has made public statements that there's no way of measuring noise levels emitted by fireworks and has recommended noiseless fireworks. Right? What is noiseless fireworks? What are noiseless fireworks?
Simply put, fireworks that doesn't make noise.
Well, I think from what perhaps we could ask
But let's detect. I would defer to the technical.
Well, noiseless fireworks, they are not entirely noiseless.
Correct.
On average, they probably emit
a bit of noise.
Yeah, a fraction of the noise of regular traditional fireworks. However, they're capable of still providing vibrant, beautiful displays with less noise, but without the bang and without the explosions, loud explosions.
So, is there a variation of cost now that comes into play with this new feature that's added onto this fireworks? Convenient, but
well, I think from our research, they can be a little more expensive than the regular fireworks. It could go up to 4 times the amount.
I recall reading
of
that. It's almost 4 times
regular
the cost
fireworks.
of
So
regular.
when you think about that, you think, well, what would be the impact of on the industry and the users? Would they be attracted to buying silent fireworks at that cost? And then there might be those users who like the noise.
So Naz, so you have 2 critical issues there. The first big is that yes, it's noiseless, and yes, it might be convenient to help reduce the nuisance on the issue, but the average person on the street will think about, why am I to put out so much more to buy something that isn't making plenty noise, and what I really want is noise. So I may not be really attracted to a noiseless firework. So as the policymakers understand, we have to think seriously about that aspect, but we also have to bear in mind what has been put out from the state enterprises, for example, TNTech, and the impact it has had. And of course, the minister has vividly told us what has happened in February with, for example, even the lantern. So you have to balance both what is possibly enjoyable from the fact that it might be noiseless and the possible effect it could have just as normal fireworks. So we have to look at both sides of the story before we make a final decision as to whether we should say that you could have noiseless fireworks.
So thank you so much. Someone, Mr. Shepard on Facebook said, I have to, along the lines of training and requirements for safe use of fireworks. I mean, we know if we have to drive a car, we have to get a license. To get a license, we have to, go through a certain level of training for it. If we are to allow citizens to, discharge fireworks, etc., if there would be an accredited kind of program to have safe training for the discharge of fireworks?
Well, again, if that goes into accreditation, that's something that will have to be seriously considered because there are many moving parts to determining how you're going to establish a body that will be charged with the responsibility for accrediting whether or not a person is best positioned to discharge fireworks. But the good news is we have the regulations which will have to be formulated. And there in those regulations is where we can probably look at policies, incorporating, regulations that would probably speak to citizens, the personal, the use of fireworks by citizens themselves. But to be quite frank, Naz, from the time I hear the word accreditation, it's bigger than just the word appears to be because there's so many moving parts to that. But of course, again, that's why we are here in a consultation, and it's something that I am sure that once we return to the drawing board, then we can do some further research and be able to make, the appropriate decision, an informed decision based on, of course, looking at international comparators, jurisdictions, for example, that would have been used as a comparator in modeling the bill that appears before us, and continuing that research to be able to make that decision if we are ready as a nation, if we can indeed practically establish that accredited body.
Thank you
Naz,
so
if
much.
I may add just
Yes.
one small comment to that from the minister. It'd be interesting. I mean, it's an interesting comment, but at the end of the day, I wonder if the general public will be prepared to put out the extra cost to hire an accredited
Correct.
technical person to do fireworks for them. At the moment, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying that you would have to apply for a permit within a time, pay a fee, pay a cost. If you introduce noiseless, it will be more expensive.
Cost, correct.
Then I hear the gentleman's comment, but I wonder if other people would say, well, why now adding on that burden to me? Now I have to pay for an accredited technician to come and...
Correct.
So that's an issue that might be in the bigger picture to be considered.
And not only that, you'd have to now establish a framework. So you don't have an institution to hire
Exactly.
employees and
Exactly.
to conduct the training.
So, okay, so if we just deviate a little, right? Remember, we have regulated as a government several industries. When we regulated cannabis, we created the Cannabis Authority. There's the authority that is responsible. Then when we looked at gaming, there's an authority that was created. Revenue, there was an authority that was created.
estate agency.
And exactly, real estate agency, there's an authority created, right? When we once I hear accreditation, I'm thinking an authority. This is at this stage of the bill, as Jared would have referenced, we are focused on the discharge and the use. We agree that fireworks, that industry as a whole, we need an entire overhaul, right? Which may very well result in considering whether we need to have this accredited body who is somewhat of an authority responsible for all of these things,
Right.
But at this stage, Naz, it would require more
So, I mean, we're on the
consideration.
administrative side of it right now.
Yes.
So, Lara Thomas on Facebook said, I trust the application fee can be paid online, so we will not have to line up in front of
Oh, well, we would
government
assume
buildings.
so.
Well, we are going the way of digitization.
Well, I know.
And
So,
even
from
with
the booth
ticketed
paper, we can play
offences-
In
online.
fact, I think at the moment, your fingerprint application is online, isn't it? I think so, from the police service. So if we keep the application at this stage to the police service, whether it's the commissioner or the senior, I think the
electronic
application for the permit
system.
will be online and the payment.
Yeah.
And we
And
are
it
going
will
along
al-
those lines.
Correct, and it will work in tandem with,
Yeah.
of course, the whole of government digitization trust.
Right. So, I'm going to read a comment here now, and I have a follow-up question. This is to Jared, right?
Okay.
So, comment is, per the question about whether or not half a mile is suitable distance for safe zone provisions, 100 yards or 0.06 miles is used in some jurisdictions in the state of Georgia. 880 yards is a generous and safe distance, especially for
800
high-density
yards.
populations.
Okay.
A tiered approach might be relevant given the category of 9 feet of fireworks in the air if it's discharged, used in the UK legislation, etc.
Right.
Right? I think this is a comment by Dr. Blake. So this brings me into my question for Gerard. What research or data or other information guided determination of the half-mile radius reference?
Well, primarily we got research from a jurisdiction in New South Wales in Australia that had a similar requirement to impose a safety distance away from similar buildings that we have in our section. But the team thought about it, and we decided that a half-a-mile radius was reasonable because it's about finding a reasonable and practicable solution, bearing in mind we don't want to include a provision that it would mean that you can't use fireworks anywhere.
So look at Australia.
So-
If I may interject,
sorry,
the size of
Sure, Minister.
Australia, the size of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
sorry to interject.
So this is why the consultation is important.
Correct.
And we welcome the comments from the stakeholder, and we will
Yes.
take it into
Correct.
consideration.
Yeah.
Right.
And as if I may say, Karen, it's an interesting point raised by Dr.
Is,
Blake
yeah.
about the two tiers, a tier system. Perhaps it's something to think about, because when we looked at that Australian model, it was a flat, I think it was 250
Yeah, it was
meters
a-
flat.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, I recall vividly the discussion between Chantal, the drafter, and Gerard, the policymaker. We were really wrangling with this 1 mile, 2 mile, half mile. It took I think a few days before we
EMA.
decided on something to go forward. No, it's not fixed in stone.
Correct.
Cast. At the end of the day, it's open to consultation. And here comes Dr. Blake with a very interesting point. Not
Yeah.
just have it set at a fixed distance, but think about the environment and tie that system based on a distance for each different. It's something we could think
It's a
about. It's
good-
very,
it's a
a
good
very,
idea.
very interesting
Yeah.
thought. I didn't even think about that, actually. We were just thinking one flat space, 1 mile, 2 mile, done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic idea.
Great.
Yeah.
We have Sarita Rampasad wondering how she can send suggestions to the law reform. I know when AGLA started this feedback process, you can send your emails and concerns to communications@ag.gov.tt, and I think they will be forwarded to the Law Reform Commission.
Well, she could write the commission directly if you
Oh,
would
yeah,
like.
she can write it to the
Commission
commission
directly.
directly. Do you all
Yes.
have a general email that you all could?
I think we do. I don't remember it
We
off my
will.
head.
So this will be posted on the AGLA's page shortly thereafter.
But Naz, what we would have to do though, and of course, because I mean these are hard-working officers, and there are other pieces of law reform that they are focused on. What would be critical is that once a notice is given from the ministry, more than likely we would give a deadline for said submissions, as we would have done in the first stage of request from the public to give us submissions. And what I'm simply asking is for members of the public to just be minded of those deadlines. We want to hear from you. Certainly, we want to take your views into consideration, but we must also remember that our hard-working, dedicated officers, there are other pieces of legislation that they're equally working on. So once we set a deadline, it's not that we want to lock off people from having that opportunity, but it's just that it will afford us the opportunity to know, okay, this is what we have now. So when we go to the drawing board, this is what we are proceeding with. So I just want to use the opportunity. Of course, once I want to believe that the communication will go out there, welcoming submissions, but of course there will be a deadline, and I'm simply, asking that members of the public try as best as they can to, of course, meet those deadlines, understanding why we would have, deadlines to those requests.
Right. Thank you. April wants to know who will have the final say for the permits. I know you touched on that before, Mr. Harry Paul.
Well, if I may answer, April, in early August, is that the Commission will make a proposal based on the consultation and our research, and at the end of the day, it will be left to our Honourable Minister and the Attorney General to settle that policy at the ministerial level. It will go, of course, as the minister indicated, eventually to cabinet, and of course, cabinet will make the
If
final
I may
decision.
interject, I think it's referred to,
the
it's
permit.
the
The
permit.
granting of the
permit.
The permit.
The
Who
COP
would
or-
approve the permit?
Yeah,
And
the
that's
COP will have the
commissioner's-
ultimate decision.
Well, as I said,
Well, no, it
at
will
the
be-
moment,
yeah.
the commission
Oh,
has an option.
well, based on the bill.
Yeah. On the bill,
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
Right.
Based on correct.
But it could go to cabinet, and cabinet might say, for example, they don't agree with
National
AOB.
security,
They have their own. At the end of the day, policy, legislative policy, is the final position is cabinet. We may suggest to the minister a position, and she may agree, or he, but at the end of the day, cabinet settles that. And whatever cabinet approves will go forward to parliament.
But as the bill appears,
At the
at the moment,
Yeah.
it's the Commissioner of
Commissioners.
Police
Okay.
who would make that determination.
All right. We have one more comment here regarding. Okay, so the other person said it will be an administrative nightmare if we go to one person for complete sign off for the permits.
But to add to that, though, what I want the members of the public to also understand, even if the decision, because again, this is not cast in stone, but even if the decision is made that the Commissioner of Police is responsible, right? Remember, there are departmental orders that a
delegate.
Commissioner of Police can pass, can put into place, where he delegates his
Yes, he can
responsibilities
delegate.
to senior
Yes.
officers,
Yes, he
first
can.
division officers.
he has that power.
Correct, he has that power. So, and I always speak about the interoperability of law, whereby even though we bring this bill, there are other pieces of law that is in existence that will help to facilitate and move forward the provisions in the current bill. So let's be minded of that. If the
Yes.
decision is taken, that the commission, we need not, it's not that it's just going to bottleneck on the commissioner's desk,
No, it won't.
because the commissioner has the power and authority by virtue of those departmental orders that he can delegate responsibilities.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but I hear the concern because it is a legitimate concern. Yeah.
So this is another question. I don't think we have a sender. This is an inbox question. This is from Gayatri. Okay, so she's saying, can the government decide to put noiseless fireworks as the punto final use, and everybody else just has to deal with it?
You see, it's easier said than done, and I'm answering it only because it's a question posed to the government. Remember when, even in the presentation and throughout the length and breadth of this discussion, we have been speaking about balancing and trying to balance the rights of all our citizens, those who want to import it and who's making $1 out of the sale of the fireworks, with the rights of the vulnerable persons, with the rights of persons who just simply want to enjoy fireworks. To make a statement to say noiseless fireworks final punto, while I agree that noiseless fireworks is a good alternative, again we have to bear in mind the cost of it, whether importers will be minded to pay that cost to import the fireworks. Correct, whether senior council will buy it, whether any of us have the money now to pay, because once the importation cost, the reality is we know that. I mean, I'm not so good in maths, but common sense, once the importation cost is increased, it means the retail value is also going to increase. So, just so Gayatri, while we hear your concerns, sweetheart, remember as policy, as government, these are all of the factors that we have to consider before the cabinet as a whole will take a particular position. Right? But we hear you, but just understand that it's not as clear cut, it's not black and white. Because we have to balance those interests.
We have a comment from Darren. Darren, it's a comment, it's not a question. Darren is encouraging everybody to use fireworks responsibly.
Excellent.
Because it affects not just pets and an elderly person, it affects wildlife, chicken farms. Chicken is expensive, and he does not want an industry to be affected by this.
Understood.
Okay, so take that advice. All right, so we are pushing ahead in terms of, has there been any support to leave the use of fireworks as is, in terms of feedback that you would have gotten?
Gerard?
To be honest, no. The majority of the comments that came in accepted this permit change. They were in support of it.
Regulation.
And we see the need to do something to regulate the use, especially on these nights, the favorite celebrations, the peak periods, we would say, for fireworks use. I think generally the public seem to welcome this new permit initiative, and we would try our best to make further progress and progress this bill.
If I may add to Jared, it's not surprising because for more than a decade now, the population has been asking for some form of regulation of the use of fireworks in the private sector.
And it's only
And in the first
for
rounds
people
of
who really,
consultation, the general consensus was some form of regulation. And I think
Something
the
must
models
be
we've
done.
looked at worldwide, the clear majority uses a system of licensing. So it's a question now to work out the semantics of who, when, cost, and those bits.
So would you say it's not clear-cut black and white because it's not I'm against or I'm in support of? Because if can regulated use be a misconstrued way of saying I'm in support of?
I guess it could be seen in support of, but really is what is really needed at this point in time. I mean, even someone who could be a fan, a avid user of fireworks, would tell you that yes, there is need to regulate how we use fireworks, and this is what this bill really is intended to achieve.
Correct.
A culture shift. People should understand here what I'm living close to a hospital. Let me not use fireworks.
Correct. And I think it could be that I'm in support of, but I'm in support of a responsible use of fireworks. Not so while I like it, but I'm in support of that responsibility as citizens on how this thing should be used.
All right. So we're at the end of the consultation, an hour and 20 minutes.
Wow.
Went by super fast, but before we wrap up and all these other things, Senior, if you would just tell us, or Jared, or Chantal as a drafter, just give us a quick ... timeline as to, okay, we've done this, we went out for public consultation, what is our next steps? Just like a quick projection of where, the bill is going to go from here now.
We all look at the policy meeting.
If I may,
Mr. Harry Potter go first. I mean, I might
in the
need to say
normal
anything else.
process of law reform undertaking, consultations for draft legislation, this is consultation number 2. We would take some time to now reconsider the first set of consultation views with the second, formulate a final position, and that's policy, strict policy. We would want direction from our Attorney General on to which of those policy considerations we should then craft now with my colleague here as the drafting officer into law, legislative provision, to amend the bill. We are in August, and if all things equal, I suspect by the next 2 to 3 months, we should perhaps have a new bill amended in reflection of the 2 consultation views and what, of course, AG finally decides should be the road we should travel on legislatively. We bear in mind that budget is next in the make, right?
Correct.
Perhaps in the next 2 or 3 months, we'd have a bill ready to go forward. That's from the Commission perspective. Once it leaves our hands into the hands of the minister, I'm afraid I would have to leave the minister to answer what happens after.
So, of course, at that stage, that is where this draft bill, the revised policy, would go before Cabinet. And once we have the now, of course, we know of the LRCs, right? And that's, of course, a law revision commission, which is Cabinet ministers who would sit with the chair of that LRC and, of course, consider the bill clause by clause, because once that policy is approved, then it can now come before an LRC for careful consideration as well. And then once we have the blessings of the LRC, then of course that's where we're looking at taking the thing to Parliament. So in a nutshell, a snapshot, that in essence.
Well, you just said taking it to Parliament. So Keisha wants to know, is this going to be a main feature of the legislative agenda for the AGLA?
It would form part of our legislative agenda, and that's why what is critical is for us to end these consultations, go to our drawing board, review the legislation, bearing in mind all of the concerns of our citizens. And once we have that and the steps that we would have all spoken to is completed, then certainly I would want to believe in the new year it can indeed form. I don't want to give an assurance to the, as politicians, we are held to our word. But if all goes well, of course, I can see this feature being featured on our legislative agenda.
All right. So, Minister, any closing remarks?
Well, Naz, as Jared said, time does go by when you're having fun. But again, I have again to thank most sincerely these committed officers of the Law Reform Commission. It's been an absolute pleasure, of course, sitting at your side, being a part of, this is my first consultation as a politician, mind you, and sitting in this ministry. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for your support and your service to country. And that is something that I have to reiterate. Every officer that sits in the office of the Attorney General, they show up for work and they work diligently. And that is not a service to a party, that is service to country, and it has to be recognized and it has to be applauded. I must also recognize in her, she is here but off camera, the chairman of the Law Reform Commission, Ms. Charlene Taylor Basso. Thank you again. It's because of your leadership we have witnessed again as the brilliance of these officers. And I must also commend the CJU unit, the Criminal Justice Unit, head by Ms. Farzana Nazir Mohammed. That entire unit have been critical also in lending support behind the scenes in bringing this bill together. And of course, to you, the stakeholders, for your comments and being a part. This is what law is. It's an active process. Law is not static, it's dynamic. And hopefully, Naz, as we continue these kind and similar consultation, we can do this thing and get it right, so citizens can be proud of the products coming out of AGLA. And of course, I must recognize the Attorney General. It is because of his blessings and, of course, giving me the opportunity as the newbie in the ministry, the minister in the ministry. I must publicly thank him for giving me the opportunity to run with this. With that being said, Naz, thank you most sincerely.
No problem.
Thank you most sincerely for being a gracious host.
This afternoon, members of the Commission and Minister yourself. I think we had a great Q&A session. To those who we could not facilitate, we have communication at ag.gov.tt. You can send your concerns there. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And please stay safe.
Good job, guys.
That's what it is.
If I were to borrow the